Welcome to session 10, which continues on philosophy, and after that we'll begin talking about politics. If the opportunity should present itself to read synopses of some of the writings from that early period in Greece, you're likely to find that the time it takes to do so would be time very well spent. Look carefully and you should find that some of these writers, these philosophers, have quietly and subtly woven the thread of a particular concept through many of their writings. Now that concept concerns the idea of reincarnation. Not that of humans returning in lower animal forms, but of advancing to higher levels of human spiritual development. The soul personality, through many incarnations, gradually unfolds like the petals of a rose, manifesting ever greater beauty as its innermost parts slowly become more visible, allowing the beauty of the inner person, the higher self, to become more outwardly visible as that person, through many lifetimes of right thinking, right living, and making right decisions, continues to advance and grow spiritually. As previously stated, this outward visibility should not be interpreted to necessarily mean outward physical beauty, but indeed should be thought of as the beauty of the inner person showing itself outwardly in many ways, including the manifestation of a more universal kind of love, compassion, and humanitarian thinking, as among other things, as a part of the life experiences of that personality. When someone from more recent times has offered their thinking, although not necessarily in the form of new ideas, since it has been said that there's nothing new under the sun, but again, if they have offered their thinking regarding the problems and questions that concern our lives today, we have had a tendency to generalize this also as philosophizing. Some may call it modern philosophy, or even speaking of one's own philosophy of life. Excuse me. There are people today, however, and this speaker is among them, who believe that the relatively near future will reveal, among other things, many greatly needed philosophical thoughts and ideas regarding the nature of our lives on this planet. A significant number of these thoughts and ideas will be specifically concerned with spirituality, science, and government. These will be ideas that have been inspired for the benefit of humankind and will in fact change the world as we know it. There will be a great many people, however, who will unwisely but openly and strongly oppose some of these ideas, and they'll resist the needed changes with all their might and strength. Some will do so because of greed or other selfish motives, because they have so much to lose, they think, while others will oppose the needed change because of a lack of understanding due to their having been misled over a very great many years. Hundreds and hundreds of millions, however, having their minds and hearts touched by the deep wisdom within these ideas, will overwhelmingly bring about the institution of these much-needed changes. The amount of time that it will take to begin and then to implement these changes may be more or it may be less, depending on a number of factors. But that's not as important as the fact that the changes will come, and our planet and its people will benefit greatly from them. Now that we've stepped across the threshold and lived for a decade in the new millennium, have you given any thought to the possibility of such changes, of what they might be and how you might reconcile them with your own philosophy of life? If not, perhaps you should give such matters some consideration, because some of the events that will eventually bring about these changes have already begun. There may be some of you, now that we're starting in this different subject, politics, who will be surprised to find that writing on politics and speaking on politics have been included in discussions about life from a spiritual perspective. Some of you may even feel angered or offended by what you see here. For those of you who do, please be assured that this session of the video series, as with the other sessions also, was not created to anger or to offend, but to inform. If perhaps you feel that a subject such as this is not an appropriate forum from which to learn about such information, then you may want to consider this. It's assumed that you want to know the truth regardless of the subject being discussed here. Why else would you have ventured so far into this series and even into this session where we're talking about politics. It is hoped that you have not done so simply out of idle curiosity. The subject matter considered in this series of videos, and especially on this subject, is generally of a very serious nature, and as the instrument of the creator of this series, I am not in the habit of arbitrarily and solely expressing personal opinions. I am, as stated, merely the instrument of delivering the information contained in this series of videos so that it will be available to those who want or need to see it, so that they may do so. Trying to avoid offending everyone, or even anyone, cannot be the foremost purpose of these videos. That purpose must be to tell the truth wherever it is needed, to give the facts wherever they're needed, and indeed, here it's needed. Nevertheless, the speaker has not tried to go out of the way to offend anyone. Still, there may be those with different mindsets who will be angered or offended by what they see. There are, however, some subjects that must be looked at frankly, and let there be no doubt that this is such a subject, because of the fact that politics and politicians play such a significant role in our lives, and all of us are affected, either directly or indirectly, by both. Talking about politics in today's world is not a happy task because of the degree to which so much of politics and so many politicians today have been perverted by greed. Greed for money and greed for power. There. It's been said, quickly, cleanly, truthfully, and straight to the point. Far too many people in the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch of the governments of so many of the so-called major world powers are so intent on furthering their own financial situation or power, or the financial situation and power of someone whom they feel can and will reward them, that they no longer truly represent the people of the society who elected them. Or if we're talking about the case of appointed officials, then the people who elected those who appointed them. In many of the smaller or less powerful countries, the situation is often the same or worse. The loyalties of elected officials in virtually every country are too often only to their own political party, or to the organizations or corporations whose lobbyists have paid or otherwise influenced them. It saddens me to say that such payments are nothing more than legalized bribery, with those having the greatest resources with which to make the legalized bribe generally having the greatest influence. The politicians accepting these funds must be somewhat careful so as to avoid arousing the anger or the ire of those whose votes they require in order to continue to be reelected. Nevertheless, these politicians know that the attention span and the memory of far too many voters is such that those running for re-election do not often feel the need to be overly cautious. There are from time to time a few politicians or political activists who stand out as brilliant exceptions. Sadly, as few of them as there are, most of them do not last very long. If they're at all effective, they become potentially dangerous to the status quo, and they are then either scandalized or discredited in some other way in an attempt to make them ineffective. If everything else fails, then something even worse may be done in order to neutralize any serious threat to the status quo from such persons. If you truly believe otherwise, be careful that you don't fall into the category of those who are so naive or so apathetic that they don't pay any attention to what's in the newspapers and news broadcasts. You have to pay attention to these things. You need not and should not be a person who does not know, or even worse, a person who doesn't care about the ever-growing millions of people all over the world who have lost their jobs and cannot find a job that pays a living wage, or about the elderly who have to choose between medicine and food and paying the rent or the winter heat bill. You need not and should not be unaware of the growing masses of people who cannot afford proper medical care, or who cannot afford a decent education for themselves or their children, or those individuals and even families with children who have no place to live and become a part of the homeless population who try to exist and survive on the streets. In addition, we must not forget about the millions of children around the world who go to sleep hungry every night. In fact, if you're not a person who knows of or cares about such things, I urge you to become such a person as soon as it's reasonably possible for you to do so. Now, your response may be that these are difficult problems and that cannot be so easily solved by politicians. If you really believe that, it should be called to your attention that these same politicians seem to have been able to figure out how to provide excellent living quarters, food, clothing, medical insurance, coverage, salary, retirement benefits, education, and transportation for them, and even great retirement benefits for themselves and their families. In addition, they've been able to keep, in some cases for many years, the job that not only provides them with a generous expense account and salary, but allows them to decide on the amount of all those other benefits, including salary and retirement benefits for themselves. If they would only apply the same ingenuity and energy to solving these same problems for those who elected them and put their trust in them, you may rest assured that these problems could and would soon be solved. I want to thank you for watching session 10 of our videos. In our next session, we'll consider further the institution of politics. I encourage you to watch. Thank you for watching this.